Evening. Welcome everyone. And in my way, I welcome in all the invisible aspects of ourselves and our ancestors and green spirits and everyone else that wants to join us today in this room to bring about greater clarification for ourselves, greater understanding, greater love, greater compassion, all those beautiful things to support us through the next year. So welcome you, welcome all of those worlds into our world. So also acknowledging the four directions, the four winds, the sacred helpers, and those that guide our universe and cosmos at this time. Because here we are, 2012, and it's not just a happening here on Earth, it is a cosmic happening. It's a happening that is being born out of our galaxy and universes and way beyond. We're not the only ones that are experiencing this time. So I'm kind of jumping in and assuming that some of you know little bits from here and there. And what I wanted to first start with was to actually look at some of the recorded, actual, tangible, physical things that are going on right now, according to our scientists, that correspond also with ancient teachings. It's like there are three converging rivers of knowledge that are meeting in a huge, great, what's that called when the rivers meet together? Confluence, right. And you know what happens when three very energetic rivers run into each other. Exactly, turbulence. Who's going which way, what way, where way. Okay. And that is, one of the rivers is the river of science. And one of the rivers is the river of ancient knowledge. Or some of you might think of that more as spirituality. And the other is the anguish for our world. Is the third river. And they're meeting in there, just literally rushing into each other as we speak. And it's from these rivers that we are now drinking. The anguish and anxiety, the place of remembering who we are from the beginning of time, and the place of intangible sometimes, amazing possibilities the science is beginning to define through the language we understand, many broader ways of understanding ourselves and our potential than we have had for many, many thousands of years. So when these three rivers meet, as we said, there's this huge sort of upsurge and chaos and which river's going where, and that they're all three actually going to join and flow as one river. The water molecules rushing down as they meet don't know this yet. They don't know this yet. They're upside down, they're inside out, they're everywhere, they're always, and they're wondering who they are, where they've come from, and what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And to understand that these three rivers that are roaring through is one of our experiences of it, yet it's not just our own experience. This time is born out of the universes. It's born out of the cosmos. It is born out of our galaxy. It is born out of huge immensity that we can't even fathom. And what does this look like? Here in our galaxy, which is the, I'm referring to as the Milky Way galaxy. Does that sort of register with everyone? Okay. It's that huge body of what we experience as stars and lights and things way up there in the sky. And every 26,000 years, the sun of our little planetary system here literally passes what I would call the equator of the Milky Way. All right, which is the center. It's like the equator, like the Milky Way has an equator, like the Earth has an equator. And the sun is directly across. Once every 26,000 years, it cycles around and hits that midpoint of the Milky Way. And in the center of the Milky Way happens to be a spiral. Everything I'm telling you right now is fact, as in scientifically proved, Hubbled out, whatever. So there we go, we go straight through, the equator goes straight through our sun to the center of the galaxy, of the Milky Way, and there is is what is called the birth cycle. And it is known to ancient man in many parts of the world as the goddess. So there she is, the Milky Way, with her belly button. And as the sun aligns, it's like the umbilical cord. And the sun is seen as the male component here. And so the ancients, the metaphor of ancient people was based on life as they experienced it. So once every 26,000 years is a sacred happening, a sacred lovemaking between the sun, the solar sun of our system, with the Milky Way. And from that is born a new world. 26,000 years. We are in a once in a 26,000 year moment. Not only when this occurs, when it occurs, there are many cycles that concur at the same time. And the one that's most probably one of the more relevant to us in this room is the cycle, the 5,000 year cycle, which also completes at this time. And the 5,000 year cycle is most accurately is kept by the Jewish faith. And it started when Egypt started. 3,000, actually it's probably, I do have notes to keep some of this stuff accurate. I forget what the date was, 3,000 something BC. But it's like the early hieroglyphics in Egypt are of that time. And that was the beginning of the 5,000 year cycle that completes now. Okay. There are more immediate little cycles. You may have heard a lot about the Maya people in relation to 2012. Why? Because they were cosmic calendar experts extraordinaire, with a knowledge and a keeping of not only just the sun and the moon calendars, but also the bigger picture calendar, the cosmic calendar, where our Western civilization, and sort of from Egyptian time over the last 5,000 years, a lot of the way that the cosmic calendar has been kept, that you will recognize, is through astrology. But it's not as detailed, and it's not as on the dot like the Maya calendar is. And the Maya calendar, in order to calculate everything, has 13 calendars. One for the sun, one for the moon, one for this, one for that. And then they understand it by putting it all together and understanding the cycles of each one, where they intercept and where they meet and where they join and where they come together. And from this they're able to predict and know where the cycles are. And the cycle that they followed very faithfully are the sun-solar cycles, which actually are only 11 years in length. And some of us here might remember one of the big solar cycles, I think it was in the 80s, where it knocked out this magnetic, we'll talk about what a solar flare is, but where it actually knocked out some of the communication early satellites. I think it was in the 80s. And that was because there were solar flares coming off the sun. There wasn't enough magnetic protection. It came through and knocked out various things. Hence, here we go into a new cycle of sun flares, right, that are the biggest. This is a cycle that was predicted to be extremely big, extremely intense, like 30 to 40% more intense than the ones we had last time. So here come the prophecies. Oh, you're going to lose satellites, you're going to lose communication, you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that. What I want to say right now about this is what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We can have a sense of, look at all these things coming together, there's a likelihood that some things could occur. But it doesn't mean it is. It doesn't mean it's, we know what, where, or how, and really, that doesn't matter. It makes No difference, really. How is it going to change your life? Or are you going to start storing food and doing this and doing that to protect yourselves from what? So for me, this time is not anything about protecting myself and hiding away from or being afraid of. It's about, wow, there's a lot going on. What does this mean for me? And what does this mean for you? And how does this mean we get to continue operating as human beings here in a constructive way and don't get overwhelmed by it? So, global warming is a cosmic event. It is not because we've been putting carbon, we've been polluting the earth to such an extent that we are personally responsible for overheating it and creating the situation. When there are solar flares of the extent that we're having right now, and the magnetic field is as weak as it is right now, we as a planet, the degrees of heat will go up. I'm not saying we are not contributing, but it's not going to make much difference to what's happening anyway. There is global warming on Saturn. There is global warming on our fellow planets. There is most probably global warming way beyond our universe. Something in the equation of creation is heating up. It was predicted, it's present, and it's here. And we are alive, and as far as I can see in this room, we're doing okay. We're really doing okay. We're getting along. How many times has humanity been through huge, great disasters, huge, great wars, huge, great this and that's, and yet we still come together and we share together and we move through things together and we still are a human family together. So again, step away from fear, step away from what if, step away from, oh, something terrible is going to happen, oh, what next is going to happen. Just relax. 2011 was full of the most dire prophecies you could possibly imagine. There were all kinds of things happening in the planets that led a potential to think terrible things were going to be happening. If I was on the North Island in Japan, terrible things did happen. You know, there were places, if I had been there at that time, I would have experienced terrible things happen. But here, somehow, in Seattle, at this point in time, we're doing okay. We're really doing okay. And that's important to remember. So what I'm saying here is global warming is a cosmic affair, to which we're kind of aiding and abetting it a little bit. We're supporting it and getting hotter, but it's not a big deal. Take us out of the equation, it would still be going on. Ice caps would be melting, oceans would be rising. It would all be happening. Here is the piece that I would ask us all to pay attention to. That's not the problem. What is the problem is our lack of respect to the earth and to the natural world and to the resources that sustain us. It's not the taking of them. The earth is going to be able to replenish herself magnificently. It might take her 200,000 years, but that's nothing in her life. Absolutely nothing in her life. Let's take the focus away from there and start talking to each other and bringing and encouraging out of each other increased capacity to be able to respect and honor all of the natural world, all of our relations, all of the lives that are coexisting right now, to celebrate coming through these kinds of changes. So I'm proposing that what we're looking at right now is a result of lack of respect. When it comes to the earth, she has plenty of resources. She will always be resourceful. There will always be something there. I would even say there are materials in the earth that we have not even yet discovered that we will be using at a time further along, that she is not revealing because she knows that we wouldn't respect it at this time. Where we have really fallen down as a human family along the way as I see it, is that we've become disconnected. We've become separated. We think of that as being out there and us being here, and we've separated ourselves out from all of that which is related to us and all that is needed. We work together with everything. We don't work separately. And our education and our worldviews and our cultural views have separated us out. And that's the piece to be concerned about. Next, I would talk about what's happening on the magnetic field, because that's a very important place to understand, because it's the connecting thread. It's kind of like the glue that keeps everything together. And through archaeology, we know there have been many, many times where the polar has shifted from north to south, south to north, or the equators become the poles. Get it? Right? So these shifts have occurred many times before. The interesting thing is that statistically they're beginning, in geological time, they're beginning to accelerate. There are more crushed up at this end of the timeline, whatever timeline means, than the other side. And there are symptoms that they've been able to get that happen prior to a polar shift. And the symptoms are kind of like a lot of what's going on right now: increased dramatic weather patterns, the birds. The magnetic field is a way of communication and navigation for the natural world, including us. We have it in ourselves, we just don't use it very much anymore. And that's hopefully something that we as we come into deeper respect, will return to us more. But that has weakened such, and that, you know, we have the stories of the birds falling out of the sky. We have, you know, we think we're familiar in the last 30, 40 years. There have been some strange stories that beach whales that show us that the magnetic field is shifting and changing. Airports have had to realign their airstrips. They've had to repaint them, because that's how much magnetic north has changed in the last 50 years. Because I think we've only been flying for about 50, 60 years, right, as far as big airports and having to change those out. So there is something very definitely going on with the poles and a shifting occurring. And this could take hundreds of years to actually make a tipping point where it actually moves in one direction. I'm not here saying tonight that, oh Lord, it's going to happen. I'm just saying that the magnetic field is tangibly weaker. And what does that mean for you and for me? When the magnetic field weakens, when we get solar flares, really big solar flares, it's that magnetic field that actually helps protect the Earth. So if your magnetic field is weaker, the flares are able to penetrate further, and therefore affect and impact weather, etc., and the Earth. And to remember that we are not separate from any of that. We are not separate from global warming. We are not separate from what is happening. It's just our education. If we were born back in the bush, or we were born of Aborigine people or something like this, you wouldn't have this feeling that something is outside of you and you can separate yourself off from it and so often then deny it. You just wouldn't have that. It just wouldn't even be part of your conscious awareness. So with the magnetic field weakening and the solar flares going, this increases the response of the planet, of Mother Earth, to what's going on, and it makes her respond in a bigger way. The other thing is that magnetism is something that runs in, it's almost, I would call it the spider web for Gaia. It just holds this whole planet in energetically. And the magnetic field is stronger in some places than it is in others. So it's not evenly distributed around the planet. There are weaker areas and there are stronger areas. And where the magnetism is stronger, you will find consciousness to be more solid, more, I'd like to say right now, stuck, and more foamed in. doesn't move or change easily. And where the magnetics are lighter, you will notice it gives it creates change. It allows things to happen differently. It allows consciousness to change. So we've got a big global thing of the magnetic field weakening overall. And would it surprise you to know that one of the places where the magnetic field is at its weakest is the Middle East? So where the magnetic field is weaker, there is a choice between conflict or consciousness change. Both are possible. And isn't that interesting that 5,000 years ago, that's where civilization, most of this, Egypt, Sumeria, which is now Iran and Iraq, all of these places, they're the ones that are beginning to be the big upheaval at this time, the Arab Spring. The other place of great magnetic decrease, which I would hope is the place that allows consciousness change, is the west coast of North America. So, that's to give you a sort of really strong example of where they're both really weak and there's a different solution happening in different places. This is why it's no surprise that, we've seen the birth of a lot of industry here. And when I say industry, I'm talking about the Google, the Amazon, all of these things, sort of the new way of not new way of doing business, I wish it was, but a new way of being in the world and technology and so on and so forth is being birthed right out here. And so when some of the ancient seers or the Dalai Lamas and so on who say, change is happening, why this area from Seattle to San Francisco is looked at as a place of real potential consciousness change, where it has the potential of happening first and happening in a way that will lead the world. So, why are you here right now, 2012, in this part of the world? It's an important place to find yourself. It's an important question to let ride its way down inside of you, deep, deep, deep. And so remember, your life is strongly affected by magnetic changes. Here on the West Coast, we are more vulnerable to feeling that than in other places of the world. Does it really surprise you that all the red states are where the magnetic field is strong?
And all the what?
Midwest, all those red states, the Republican states, is where it's held strong. Another place where it's held really fixed is Russia. Does this begin to give you an idea of how the different magnetic fields affect and impact people's lives, cultural lives, and the way people live and the way people are? I'm sure I'm not the only one who notices when you get on a plane to go to the East Coast, people wear suits. When they come out here, they're all wearing casual clothes. I always know when I'm on a plane to Seattle because everyone is very casually dressed. Maybe less so in the last few years, but it was really pronounced 10, 20 years ago. And so those are physical things that are going on that the scientists will talk about, that are the same as your ancient teachings, oral teachings talking about. Okay, and it's why the anxiety river is up so much, because we're at a time where we don't know, we can't see what's next. And yet, it's very arresting to me that we're all here in this area right now, and in the way I see the world, we already know each other. There's been a lot of talk over the last few years about imaginal cells. And when I first started talking about the birth of the caterpillar and the imaginal cells, it was like 2, 3, maybe, did I mention it? I think that makes it 3 years ago. But now I think it's almost become part of the common conversation. It's not news anymore that when a caterpillar, briefly catch you up in case you haven't heard it before, when a caterpillar goes into a cocoon, right before that point, caterpillar, everything's functioning really really well, really fine. It's just ticking along, everything's going really nicely, and then all of a sudden, parts of it start to slow down. Its systems are no longer working, everything's grinding to a halt, there's complete chaos, all the directions for the cells aren't making sense, they're not working any longer, it sort of gradually develops into this brown sludge pile. And out of that sludge pile comes some cells that have a slightly different memory. And they remember that there's something else going on here and that they have another idea. And they have this idea about this beautiful flying machine. And they suddenly remember this and they're looking out and they go, oh, and they recognize each other in the sludge as someone who knows about the blueprint for the flying, beautiful flying machine. And they gradually start gravitating together and generating energy, and then slowly but surely the energy is so exciting and so wonderful. It entrains the old cells that have given up into following this new idea, and out is launched the butterfly. So a few years ago, a lot of us were teaching about the imaginal cell, going, you know, can you see me? Can you see me? We're all we're imaginal cells waking up to who we are in the sludge, which is the sort of deterioration of what we know gradually falling apart around us. And what I'm here to say is the imaginal cells are up and running, and we are more than finding each other, and there's a new momentum. How many of you actually felt the surge of energy that came through for this New Year's, that it felt pretty different from certainly 2011, right? I think a lot of us, if you didn't, doesn't mean anything. It really is going on. Some days one of us might feel it, another one the other, but to really realize that something very different is occurring. And it has to do with a huge waking up. For instance, today I went out to look at some retreat spots in the hopes of moving some of my work into fancier settings. Not that this isn't fancy, but I'm talking about accommodations and being catered food and some other things that, you know. And places are saying the same thing. They've all had they've had a real difficulty filling their places in the last 2-3 years. It's just like a crash. This year they are booked. And there is this feeling that everyone is appearing and everyone's going, yes, here I am, I'm all awake and I'm ready to go, and where am I supposed to go, and what, And so there is this excitement building because we're all waking up. And more of the people you know are going to wake up and go, you know that funny stuff about energy, maybe you're right, maybe I should go look at that. So be ready for others' questions. I have permission from, I'm involved in a lot of different things which some of you are fully aware of and some of you are kind of aware of. Anyway, we have what I call a dream society, which is a small group of us that have been dreaming for several years together. We decided to see what we could dream in, what if we went into our dreams and asked about predictions for 2012? What would happen? And we came together and sort of dreamed out of it. It's not a tidy process, dream work. It's, some of you in dream classes, it's very intuitive. It's like following breadcrumbs, mystical, magical breadcrumbs. And it's about really connecting with what's the same and what's different. And it's far from being a linear scientific world. And what we really came out strongly with was the message for this year was about being focused. I don't know how I read the newsletter, but that was based on some of the dream work that I had done, which is that when 3 big rivers like that meet and create such a huge surge of energy, the surge of energy doesn't quite know where to direct itself yet, right? It's in the middle of meeting up and splashing and going, wow, but it hasn't found its way of how it's directed and focused and how it's going to channel its energies, and everything is in chaos. The one thing that we have as human beings that we can develop and bring to the chaos that surrounds us, both inside and outside of us, and that is focus, by really paying attention to where we are going. So in previous years, I've always said, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've said, don't plan, just allow, flex, blah, blah. This year, I'm saying, this is the year to really take a look at what it is, where you want to be at the end of this year. Because there are going to be times this year, from inside and outside, that you are going to experience losing focus. And when you lose focus, your experience is going to be of being in that confluence, you decided what the word was, of the rivers, and just being churned and turned and not knowing which side is up and which side is down. But if we have focus, if we have a foundation, if we know why we're alive, who we are, and it's not so much specifically where we're going, but just that we are going, that river that I'm talking about, that one river exists, and in all of this turmoil, somehow it doesn't make sense, but I know where I'm going to that river, then with that focus, you will emerge out of this year truly into a much better version of yourself, and you're going to be really, it's a year of huge opportunity and huge ability to develop your creativity and your connection with spirit, your creator, whatever it is, and you're being asked to focus. It's that steering that car in the snowstorm and not getting distracted by the snowflakes coming at you. This 2012 is going to come at you. There is so much going on that's energetically changing your bodies right now. Okay, we can't see it. It's happening. How do we know it's happening? How many people in this room have experienced either someone falling over in the last few weeks, in front of them, beside them, or it's been themselves? Okay, take a look at these hands. That's because our bodies are very dense. The energy is changing inside of us and outside of us. It is changing vibration, and our bodies have a hard time catching up. We are walking literally half out of our bodies at the moment. And it's not about soul retrieval work, folks, because it's happening to all of us, all right? So, if you find someone slightly out of their body, wait before you retrieve their soul. Maybe just fine. So this is out of body business. How many of you have experienced having going to do something and finding you've already done it? Okay. There's a displacement. How many people in here have lost a day that they cannot remember? Look, these are not ordinary things. If I'd said this last year, there wouldn't have been a hand, maybe one hand up in the room. These are just expressions of what happens when your body vibration is being changed at such a fast pace, and your dense body can't catch up. It will, eventually, it will, 2016. Slip that one in. 2016. Okay, so focus is essential. How many people find that their driving is not quite what they thought it was? And other people's driving is what you'd want it to be. Okay, so please be very careful. This is a year not to be cautious about the big tidal wave that's coming to get you. Just take care of the details of yourself and who you are in space and what you're, stay present. How many times have we been told by our elders and our great teachers, when the big changes happen, stay present and stay in your heart. Right? That's all we have to concern ourselves. Ride the wave. I had a brilliant one about that. I looked at the wave and there were all these ducks, and I woke up and went, oh, get your ducks in a row. Which then I was told very strongly, and again this is in the newsletter, that it's not only a matter of simplifying my own life, but we all need to simplify. Because if you're carrying too much and you hit that confluence of water where the three rivers meet, it's all going to go anyway. All right? And then you're going to think you've lost something. So, much better to do that of choice. And in that sense, there's a sort of feeling of urgency around really simplifying your lives to a place that's manageable. There's a lot of things that are unmanageable about the way we live. There's a lot of things that are unmanageable about the way this country lives, etc., etc., etc. And we did a lodge this Sunday that gave forward some really beautiful information about living in the heart, as that's been one of the instructions for a long time. And what does that mean? What does that mean? And one thinks maybe we have an idea about it, and then it goes, and then sort of disappears. And so what they said was that, remember, Earthways is always based on Earth life. So they said, remember how the sun is to the Earth, to Mother Earth. The solar sun it generates energy. And it generates what is needed for growth and expansion. So it is your heart is the generator of your physical body. It is the sunshine to the rest of you, because it does the generating and the circulating. So, very strong came in the lodge. I can't remember if anyone, Monique was in, was that to stop sending your prayers outside of yourselves. It's not about, please God, please God who lives out there, would you do this, that, and the other. It's about really centering and pouring the love energies directly into yourself and into your heart chakra, into your heart space, into your physical heart. Those that have come to the Me and I workshop, the Me and I is a day where you learn a different form of prayer which goes inside first. So some of you already are on that practice, and it's a very important practice, but they really I was interested because I've never heard the elders within the lodge ceremony, which is a North American, Native American ceremony, to speak about, they didn't speak about the Ho'oponopono prayer, but that's what they were talking about, but it was in their reference point, which is the sun is the generator for Mother Earth. Your heart is the generator for your physical body. And then they said that your soul is the generator of your existence. Write that down. I can see that the soul is your generator for this is your human existence. We're all in our human bodies here, right? Our human life, as opposed to our physical body. So, generators are the ones that give energy, supply, support. The soul supplies and supports us through the storyline, through the previous lives, through the nuance and the poetry of who we are here now. Okay. Now I'm going to read my notes and see what I can do. One of the things I would also speak about this year is that this is not the year, at least to come to me and talk about positive affirmations. It's not the year to come to me and talk about, just solely talk to me about how we can create new spaces and we can just do this all because we can see it and we're just going to stay in the light. Come to me if you are willing to see both the nightmare and what is potentially possible, because they're both present right now, and unless we accept both, we're unable to go further. And that is how the annihilation will occur, or it has a possibility. I want you, the way I see it is, it's like you have to look fully into the two eyes of the serpent this year. Because that nightmare out there of human suffering is immense, and it's not separate from you. I'm not here to overwhelm you with it. I'm not here to doom and despair about it. I'm saying, can you look at both the huge potential that exists this year, the ability to really create new possibilities, consciousness change, all of these things, at the same time as you hold the nightmare of civilization, the pain, the suffering that is occurring. Because both are true, and it's not out there. It is part of our whole human family. We have the greatest potential from here on out to move into literally a global human family. It really is coming. It is arriving. It is arising. I absolutely am firmly, I can begin to see it. I can taste it. It's happening. And I'm acknowledging at the same time the huge suffering that is occurring from being so disconnected for so long. I'm not trying to solve it. I'm just saying, both are present, both are true, and when you can hold that simultaneously in the brain, which is unable to hold two things at once, keep that vision going, two eyes of the serpent, two eyes of the serpent, two eyes of the serpent. It'll allow your heart to move freely and to flow and to move, because you will have just disturbed the brain enough that it can't operate in its way, old ways. It is not just simply positive or negative. It is where those three rivers meet and become one, which means both exist at the same time. The greater the light, the greater the dark. We live in a world, in order to be able to do this, be here together in this fabulous ability of the physical world, polarity exists. Can we transcend it? Can we get into what is known as non-duality? We do it by transcending, transforming, and that's done by holding two things, constant flow together, and then suddenly something else emerges. But nothing can emerge unless you can hold them both steady. Emergence is a word that will grow in everyone's consciousness this year also. Emergence is those three rivers meeting and then becoming one. Who's traveled to India? Right. How do you cross the street in India? You have to emerge to the other side. There is no direct action. So emergence is that you have a focus, right? I'm getting to the other side of the road. Nothing makes sense. There isn't even a right side or a left side or anything. And I step out and I get across, but only because I'm focused. I'm just going, I'm getting to the other side. That's all I know. And somehow, everyone gets out of the way and you emerge onto the other side. Maybe it's probably not directly across, but somewhere across on the other side. That is emerging. Emerging is, have you ever seen these incredible flocks of birds or films of them where it's starlings and they're just like in clouds and swirls and patterns? They're not doing anything in particular. There is no leader. They are just flowing with the electromagnetic pattern with no resistance and usually moving out of each other's. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, they pass each other this close. And what happens is they just allow and everything flows and something else emerges, and what we get to see are those beautiful sweeping patterns. Emerging is a very important understanding of the new consciousness. Occupy movements have emerged out of the chaos of what's going on right now. Or you can call it disaffection or whatever it is, but it's basically chaotic what's going on. And what has it, it's like the weeds growing out of the concrete, pushing up the dandelion, pushing up through and flowering anyway. And the Occupy movement, I would imagine more like it or whatever, that we're going to see more of that kind of approach to expression than we have, because it follows the sort of the New World energy lines of not having a plan, not having a strategy, just having a way of being and allowing that to create a solution that has not necessarily been thought of before. I'm waiting to see what that is before identifying it. So it's very interesting to me when people said, oh, they need leaders, they need to make, they need to get politically active. And they stood firm to their ground. They said, that's not what we're about. They're about consciousness changing. They're about asking questions. They're about making you feel a bit uncomfortable. But they're not about direct, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. And the more comfortable you are in that kind of a way of seeing, the faster you will be in finding yourselves being happy, being okay with what's going on, and just generally being stable and excited and helpful with what's going on. The struggle will be with people that resist this and will insist on the old way of doing things. They're just going to get nowhere. They're going to be that stuck magnetic energy. It's going to sort of glue them to the ground. They're not going to be able to move. So that's what that one's about. So my premise here is that we're at a sort of tipping point. 2012 was a mathematically in our sense, I guess, but those ancient people with much more knowledge than we could even begin to grasp were able to make these predictions. The other culture that does the 26,000 years is the Hindu Vedas. Recognize the 26,000 year cycle, just them and the Maya. The Maya are the ones with all of the different calendars, though. Within the astrology, astrological, the 12 signs of the zodiac, we are moving from Pisces into Aquarius. So there's a progression across the heavens. And that whole progression is 26,000 years. Okay, so ancient man knew all these things a long time ago in some capacity, one that we don't understand from where we stand. But they could have been far more civilized, quote, quote. Their knowledge was different and possibly greatly surpassed what we know now. Who knows? Question mark. But that there's this huge cycle of 26,000 years. We've got the smaller cycle, and they're all meeting. And the calendars by the Maya that have proved very, very accurate pinpointed 2012, this winter solstice, 2012, so it's December of this year, coming up, as the point. And when I went down to spend some time with an elder in the Yucatan, he said that 2012 was actually stretching from about 2008 to 2016. And some of the intense markers,
16
to 16. He says the intense markers are the lunar eclipse, which we just had, to the lunar eclipse we'll experience in 2014. Okay. And then there's a solar eclipse here. We can all get excited about that because it's like in Oregon, full eclipse. It's like on the energy line. That's 2015. And hopefully then we'll start birthing out very differently. We're going to feel well. Another thing that, remember that this electromagnetic field does, it hits the nervous system, it hits the immune system. We've seen a huge increase of various things that affect that. The immune disease is huge at the moment on this planet. And I'm just saying that's kind of a result of that. And the more you're able to actually be in the energy, keep changing, keep moving with it, age 24, pick yourself up, it's okay. Being careful, being focused, you're going to be less impacted by a crashed immune system. Your health is going to stay better than someone who is resisting that, not acknowledging that, ignoring it, and then denial of it. So it is one of the ways to stay healthy. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. I actually also wanted to ask you some questions, like things to think about. One of them is, do you realize that what you have been born into at this time is a sense of yourself that is older than you can imagine. As you sit here, you have a sense that you have been existing since the beginning of time. Who has a sense of themselves as being far more than is in the room and it goes backward? You know, I mean, in the sense of past. I mean, I think we all do. That is one of the indicators of consciousness change. And I really want to bring it into you that your consciousness is changing. It's not just this person out there or that person over there. It's not me. It's happening to us all. It is happening to everyone. And one of the things is getting a greater sense of oneself, not just as here, this is my life, that's it, and when I die, and suddenly there grows upon people, and there's more and more people, it's going to grow upon them that they're far bigger than this presence here right now. There's a sense of themselves that is far greater, that's connected to something far bigger going on. That is an aspect of consciousness change. Okay, it's not that you were born special and gifted, it's a consciousness change. It's happening to everyone. Question I want to ask is, what if leadership in politics was about the capacity to heal, to engage in deep reconciliation, a skill to move beyond into collaboration and achievement of common objective? I mean, that's the world I want to dream about. It's not to take the politicians out, but have a consciousness change in politics and such that they're talking, instead of talking about what's right and wrong and this person and that person, it's about what can we do to heal this situation that has been created here? What is it that we can bring? I mean, plenty of people in here involved in the medical world, you know, you have a wound, the first thing you've got to do is clean it before you can do anything else to it. And we're in that process of, you know, we need to, as a collective human family, start taking care of cleaning the wound first. Step one, cleaning the wound. Then we can see what's going on. But right now, we haven't even attempted to do that. And it's a big project. And that room, you know, that's where we can start with ourselves. That's something that each person in this room can do, is heal, is to first of all look to wash, first of all, their wounds, so that the healing process can naturally occur. It's not going to occur with the dirt in there. So I'm hoping that, you know, where I am is 2012 is this tipping place, this place where this new awareness can really take hold. We know that if the consciousness gets to be a certain amount, it will exponentially grow. I think Greg Braden quotes piece, and I think it's 11%, 11%. Once that has occurred, then it's instantaneous, everyone gets it. Whether that's, you know, I haven't ever sort of checked that one out on a complete way, but what I have noticed is that when I think about how people were talking out there in the cafes and things 10 years ago, the conversations really changed. And I know that the work that I do is accepted and welcomed in far many more places than it was 10 years ago. And there is a curiosity that's awakening to find out that things are happening such that they can't be explained in tangible five senses. So people are asking questions and wondering. And I'm saying the electromagnetic field is the physical thing that's happening, but it's also happening on all levels. So we're able to be far more aware and to be able to have far more access to many of the realities that exist outside of this one. And many, many people now are waking up to going, oh, maybe this really isn't the only reality there is. Maybe not. Anyways, so it's a time of quickening. The earth is quickening, the solar system is quickening, we are quickening, everything is quickening, we're alive, we're alert. Doesn't mean we can bring back in 1950s terms what it is we're seeing and doing and being. But I think we are now at a place which I don't think we were 2 years ago, is that we can begin to really feel the rebirth, the birthing inside of ourselves, and it really doesn't matter anymore what it looks like. We're just so happy to feel this movement and to be moving forward and to be carrying a vision of a place where we work collectively to bring about healing, to bring about health, to bring about well-being, not just to ourselves but to everyone on this planet. And in a small scale, I mean, we complain and we say, oh my God, look what they're doing, we don't have healthcare, we don't have this and we don't have that. Just look back 100 years and how much better we are. We're really limited, but we are taking better care of everyone than we were 100 years ago. We're only just starting out. So that's what I would bring everyone to in 2012, is we are going forward. It is happening. We can even look back now and see how far we've come in a short time, and that with the companionship together, with the community, with the acknowledgement of whether that person does it the way you want to do it, but you can acknowledge that they're awake and they're ready. It's like that's what's going to bring us into the new world. And if you've noticed tonight, I've not talked at all about fear, because that is what's going to just completely close it down. So I'm inviting you all to not live in that place, but to join the place of optimism, join the place of hope, to really stand fully in that feeling that is birthing in all of us. This is the first year in ages that I stand here fairly confidently knowing that what I'm feeling, you're all feeling. We don't know what it is, but it's better than last year. And there's a lot of like, wow, maybe I'll go out with it, but at least it'll be exciting and I'll feel like I'm doing something, I'm going in a direction and I don't know what that means, and it feels good, and I've got a lot of really good people right beside me. It's very much, we're not alone. 10 years ago, I sort of said that I was feeling pretty much away. Just like, build it. So finally, science is collaborating with the ancient teachings. That river of anguish will be there, and anxiety will be there, but it creates the friction and the edge. And we're just in the place where all three have just crashed into each other. But there's an amazing force and power behind this that is way bigger than ourselves. And I believe that's why we're here. We're destined. We're going. We're going to make it through.